We've been going through a series on the last days of the Old Covenant. We've been focusing on Matthew 24. This is our ninth message in this series. So far, Jesus has pronounced judgment on the religious leaders, on Jerusalem, and that the temple would be torn down. The disciples wanted to know when this was going to happen, and Jesus answered them by saying he was going to come back and destroy the temple in their generation, and he's been telling them what is going to lead up to that day. He said there would be tribulation for the disciples and that there would be many false teachers leading people astray, and they would need to endure all of this until the end of the age to be saved. And last week we looked at how the gospel of the kingdom was going to be proclaimed in all the known world before the end of the age came. Now let's continue now in Matthew 24 with verse 15. Matthew 24:15. Therefore, when you see the abomination of desolation, which was spoken of through Daniel the prophet, standing in the holy place, let the reader understand. So this abomination is an abomination of serving idols and the Lord at the same time, like the Queen of Heaven in Jeremiah 44:22 and Mammon in Luke 16:15. So in speaking about Israel in Jeremiah 44:22, it says, So Yahweh was no longer able to bear it because of the evil of your deeds, because of the abominations which you have done. Thus your land has become a waste place, an object of horror and an imprecation, without an inhabitant, as it is this day, because you have burned incense and have sinned against Yahweh, and not listened to the voice of Yahweh, or walked in his law, his statutes, or his testimonies. Therefore this evil has befallen you, as it has this day. So they had abominations that caused a desolation in their past already. So this is nothing new. Then Luke 16:15 says, talking to the Pharisees, the religious leaders, and he said to them, You are those who justify yourselves in the sight of men, but God knows your hearts, for that which is highly esteemed among men is detestable or an abomination in the sight of God. So the Pharisees were doing things that were an abomination before God, and because of that, they were going to be made desolate. And the final abomination by the Jews that leads to the desolation of the temple is serving Caesar over Christ. And we see that in John 19:15. It says, So they cried out, Away with him, crucify him. Pilate said to them, Shall I crucify your king? The chief priests answered, We have no king but Caesar. So they chose Caesar over Christ, which was an abomination which would lead to their final desolation. So this goes way back to them breaking the covenant and getting the curse. That's where all this starts from. So Leviticus 26, I'm going to read verse 1 and 2, and then some other verses in Leviticus 26. You shall not make for yourselves idols, nor shall you set up for yourselves a graven image or a sacred pillar, nor shall you place a carved stone in your land to bow down to it. For I am Yahweh your God. You shall keep my Sabbaths and fear my sanctuary. I am Yahweh. Verse 14 and 15. But if you do not obey me and do not do all these commandments, if instead you reject my statutes, and if your soul loathes my judgments so as not to do all my commandments and so break my covenant, verse 31 through 33, then I will give your cities over as a waste, and I will make your sanctuaries desolate, and I will not smell your soothing aromas, and I will make the land desolate, so that your enemies who inhabit it will themselves feel desolate because of it. You, however, I will scatter among the nations, and will draw out a sword after you, as your land becomes desolate and your cities become waste. So this was way back in the law of God, that you commit these abominations, you're going to be desolated. So this starts way back then, and it happened to them with Babylon, and it was going to happen to them soon in their generation, Jesus was saying. So in Daniel 9, it talks about how Jesus puts an end to sacrifice by being the final sacrifice, and he has it physically removed by the Romans. Luke 21:20 actually confirms this and interprets Matthew 24:15 for us. So we have the interpretation right here in Luke 21:20. So instead of talking about the abomination of desolation, this is what he says. But when you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, then know that its desolation is at hand. So we know that in AD 66, 67, Jerusalem was surrounded by the Roman army, and then they were desolated. And so that's what he's talking about. That's when the abomination of desolation is. And so what I just said so far, this should be sufficient explanation for us to understand what's going on here in the context of Matthew 24. But since Jesus mentions Daniel's prophecy, we should probably look a little at the context of that prophecy in Daniel. So we're going to look at just some parts of chapter 2, 7, 8, 9, 11, and 12 of Daniel. And we'll see how this connects with Matthew 24 and the rest of the New Testament. And thanks to Jesus, we can view these passages through the interpretive grid that he gave us, that the Roman army is somehow involved in the abomination of desolation spoken of in Daniel. So, quick note, Daniel is one of the hardest books to interpret. He talks about so many kings and wars without giving specific names and dates. This leaves room for a ton of speculation. You can read all kinds of history books into the text. And so now, even though we may not fully understand all the details, I believe because of the New Testament, we can understand the overall story and the conclusion. So I'm going to show some parallels and give some possibilities, but we should be able to agree on the ending. So first, I'm going to go through some verses in Daniel 2. Daniel 2:28 talks about how this takes place in the last days, which we've already defined as last days of the Old Covenant. Daniel 2:28 says, "However, there is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries, and he has made known to King Nebuchadnezzar what will take place in the last days. This was your dream and the visions of your head while on your bed." So he's talking about his dream he had, and I'll give some more of it. So down to verse 32 of Daniel 2 to 35. So just note how the feet are iron mixed with clay. So Daniel 2:32. "The head of that image was made of fine gold, its breast and its arms of silver, its belly and its thighs of bronze, its legs of iron, its feet partly of iron and partly of clay. You continued looking until a stone was cut out with hands, and it struck the image on its feet of iron and clay and crushed them. Then the iron, the clay, the bronze, the silver, and the gold were crushed all at the same time and became like chaff from the summer threshing floor. And the wind carried them away so that not a trace of them was found. But the stone that struck the image became a great mountain and filled the whole earth." And so Christ's kingdom strikes the feet, it says. So Daniel 2 verse 40 now. "There will be a fourth kingdom as strong as iron, inasmuch as iron crushes and shatters all things. So like iron that breaks in pieces, it will crush and break all these in pieces. Now in that you saw the feet and toes, partly of potter's clay and partly of iron." So potter's clay, what does that remind you of? That's Israel. Israel, God's the potter, the clay is Israel, just so you know. And partly of iron. "It will be a divided kingdom, but will have in it the toughness of iron, inasmuch as you saw the iron mixed with common clay. And as the toes of the feet were partly of iron and partly of clay, so some of the kingdom will be strong and some of it will be brittle. And in that you saw the iron mixed with common clay, they will combine with one another in the seed of men, but they will not cling to one another, even as iron does not combine with clay. And in the days of those kings, the God of heaven will cause a kingdom to rise up, which will never be destroyed, and that kingdom will not be left for another people. It will crush and put an end to all these kingdoms, but it will itself stand forever. Inasmuch as you saw that a stone was cut out of the mountain without hands, and that it crushed the iron, the bronze, the clay, the silver, and the gold, the great God has made known to the king what will happen in the future. So the dream is certain, and its interpretation is trustworthy. So he'll go on to talk about these kingdoms in Daniel, that Babylon was the head, then the second one is the Medo-Persian Empire, then the third one was the Greek Empire, and then the fourth most likely is Rome, but it's Rome mixed with Israel. There's a lot of kings in Israel pulling strings during that time and doing damage. But it's during that time period that Christ's kingdom comes. So this is not a future kingdom, is my point. It's limited to that time period. That was 2,000 years ago. In Daniel 7:3, it talks about how there's the four beasts are the same kingdoms as Nebuchadnezzar's dream. So Daniel 7 talks about beasts instead of the statue. And the fourth beast, just like bottom part of the statue, is the same sea beast of Revelation 13. And this corresponds to the legs of Nebuchadnezzar's statue, and its feet made of clay correspond to the land beasts in Revelation 13. Now, we're not going to go there to Revelation 13, but you can check that out. There's a lot of comparisons there. But I'm going to read a few verses in Daniel 7 now. Verse 3 says, "And four great beasts were coming up from the sea, different from one another." So they're coming up from the sea. Typically, the sea represents the Gentiles. These are Gentile beasts. Daniel 7:7 talks about how the remnant gets trampled down. Daniel 7:7, "After this I kept looking in the night visions, and behold, a fourth beast, fearsome and terrifying and extraordinarily strong, and it had large iron teeth. It devoured and crushed and trampled down it says remainder, but it's the same word as remnant. Trampled down the remnant with its feet, and it was different from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns." Usually when the Bible's talking about the remnant, again, it's talking about Israel. And then verse 8, it talks about this boasting little horn. Daniel 7:8, "While I was contemplating the horns, behold, another horn, a little one, came up among them, and 3 of the first horns were pulled out by the roots before it. And behold, this horn possessed eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth speaking great boasts." So we have this little boasting horn, and we're going to see this boasting horn all throughout the rest of Daniel as we go through these chapters. Verse 11 of Daniel 7 talks about the beast that boasted was killed, which was the little horn. Daniel 7:11, "Then I kept looking because of the sound of the great boastful words which the horn was speaking. I kept looking until the beast was killed, and its body was destroyed and given to the burning fire." So this beast was destroyed and killed. So this little horn is not talking about Rome. Rome was not destroyed. This is a king during that time that may be from Israel, maybe from Rome, but it's someone that was killed during that time. But we'll keep going, see if we can figure it out. So I'm going to read now Daniel 7:17 through 26. "These great beasts, which are 4 in number, are 4 kings who will arise from the earth. But the saints of the highest one will receive the kingdom and possess the kingdom forever for all ages to come. Then I desired to know the exact meaning of the fourth beast, which was different from all the others, extraordinarily fearsome, and its teeth of iron, and its claws of bronze, and which devoured, crushed, and trampled down the remainder or remnant with its feet. And the meaning of the 10 horns that were on its head, and the other horn which came up, and before which 3 of them fell, namely that horn which had eyes and a mouth speaking great boasts, which was larger in appearance than its associates. I kept looking, and the horn was waging war with the saints and overcoming them, until the Ancient of Days came, and judgment was given in favor of the saints of the highest one, and the season arrived when the saints took possession of the kingdom. So this one making the great boast was waging war against the saints. So we'll see this theme throughout Daniel. Verse 23, thus he said, the fourth beast will be a fourth kingdom on the earth, which will be different from all other kingdoms, and will devour the whole earth and tread it down and crush it. As for the 10 horns, out of this kingdom 10 kings will arise, and another will rise after them, and he will be different from the previous ones, and will make low 3 kings. He will speak words against the Most High and wear down the saints of the Highest One, and he will intend to make changes in seasons and in law, and they will be given into his hand for a time, times, and half a time. But the court will sit for judgment, and his dominion will be taken away, annihilated, and destroyed forever. So again, we're going to see this over and over. Daniel recapitulates the same thing over and over. And so we see this little horn, this small horn, this person that's boasting, and we're getting some more information on him. So he's persecuting the saints. And so who was the one persecuting the saints in that time? Well, we'll keep reading. We'll see. In verse 27. Now verse 27 may be connected to Acts 17:30, where God commands allegiance to him, and that he is judge of all. So Daniel 7:27 says, then the reign, the dominion, and the greatness of all the kingdoms under the whole heaven will be given to the people of the saints of the Highest One. His kingdom will be an everlasting kingdom, and all the dominions will serve and obey him. Now you may think, well, wait, Rome wasn't destroyed. How is it all kingdoms now serve God? Well, if you look at Acts 17:30 and 31, look what it says here. This is Paul talking to the Greeks, so people throughout the Roman Empire he's talking to. These aren't Jews. Therefore, having overlooked the times of ignorance, God is now commanding men that everyone, everywhere should repent, because he has fixed a day in which he will judge the world in righteousness through a man whom he determined, having furnished proof to all by raising him from the dead. So, since Christ's kingdom was coming and he is now the king, now everyone has allegiance to him. Everyone throughout the Roman Empire, even though there's still Roman Empire, and the thing is, there's still kingdoms on this world, as we talked about last week. You have physical kingdoms all over, but Christ's kingdom is the only one that rules the whole world, and all allegiance goes to him, to Christ. All right, Daniel verse 9 through 14 talks about the small horn now. And out of one of them came forth a rather small horn, and it grew exceedingly great toward the south, toward the east, and toward the beautiful land. Then it grew up to the host of heaven, and caused some of the hosts and some of the stars to fall to the earth, and it trampled them down. That sounds like Revelation 12 right there. And it even magnified itself to be equal with the commander of the hosts, and it removed the regular sacrifice from him, and the place of his sanctuary was thrown down. That sounds like the abomination of desolation right there. It doesn't say it exactly, but that's the same thing, and we'll see this again in Daniel. Verse 12, and on account of transgression, the hosts will be given over to the horn along with the regular sacrifice, and it will throw truth down to the ground and do its will and succeed. So he's throwing truth to the ground. This guy is a deceiver, and he's leading people astray, and we'll see this theme throughout Daniel and the New Testament as well. Verse 13, then I heard a holy one speaking, and another holy one said to that particular one who was speaking, how long will the vision about the regular sacrifice apply while the transgression causes desolation, so as to allow both the holy place and the hosts to be trampled? He said to me, for 2,300 evenings and mornings, then the holy place will be made righteous. And so once the temple in Jerusalem was trampled down and made desolate, then the holy place is no longer in that Jerusalem. It's the new Jerusalem, the spiritual one that comes down out of heaven. And we as believers are now in that holy place, which is made righteous. All right, Daniel 8, in Daniel 8:23 to 26, Daniel's talking about all these kingdoms, so I'm skipping parts. So he talks about the Medo-Persian Empire, he talks about Greece, and then after that, this is where he leaves off right here, verse 23. In the latter period of their reign, when the transgressors have run their course, a king will stand, insolent and skilled in intrigue. First of all, when the transgressors have run their course, who is considered transgressors throughout the Bible? Who's trespassing his law? It's Israel. They're the ones that have his law. Verse 24, his power will be mighty, but not by his own power. And so, again, we've got to do a little speculation here, but we know from the New Testament that the people in power in Judaism, in Israel, high priests, all the religious leaders, even the kings that they had, they didn't have that much power, but they used the Roman Empire to persecute the Christians. We know that all throughout the New Testament. We're not going to look at all that, but we know that. So it says his power will be mighty, but not by his own power. It's not his own power he's doing it, he's using other power. And he will destroy to an astonishing degree and succeed and do his will. He will destroy mighty men and the holy people. And through his insight, he will cause deceit to succeed by his hand. And he will magnify himself in his heart. And he will destroy many while they are at ease. He will even stand against the prince of princes. That's Christ right there. But he will be broken without hands. That's, again, Christ doing that. And what had appeared about the evenings and mornings, which has been told, is true. But as for you, conceal the vision, for it pertains to many days in the future. Now he's telling Daniel it's many days in the future, right? Now this is hundreds of years. This is a few hundred years after this. That's the many days in the future. And yet, when we get through all the New Testament over and over, it says the time is near, the time is near, the time is near. But back then, a few hundred years is many days in the future. That's a few hundred years. But now a couple thousand years it's been since then. Oh, that means near. Where's the logic in that? Biblically, it's not logical. The guy that has this power, whoever this is, I mean, we can only speculate. We don't know for sure. He's empowered by Satan, and he's persecuting God's people by using another people, like I said earlier, just like the way the Jerusalem leaders use Romans to persecute the Christians. And then Jesus breaks him with the word of his mouth. And we see that in 2 Thessalonians 2:8. So let me just read 2 Thessalonians 2:3 through 12 real quick, just because all this stuff connects together. It's hard to not read all this stuff because it all connects together, and it's all connected to the abomination of desolation. That's why we have to read it. Let no one in any way deceive you, for has not come, he's talking about the day of the Lord. The day of the Lord has not come unless the apostasy comes first, and the man of lawlessness is revealed, the son of destruction, who opposes and exalts himself above every so-called God or object of worship, so that he takes his seat in the sanctuary of God, exhibiting himself as being God. Do you not remember that while I was still with you, I was telling you these things? And you know what restrains him now, so that in his time he will be revealed. For the mystery of lawlessness is already at work. Only he who now restrains will do so until he's taken out of the way. So one thing he is saying, whoever this is at Paul's time, it was somebody that was there now. He's not talking about a future person. He's talking about how he's being restrained now at that time, 2,000 years ago. Verse 8, and then that lawless one will be revealed, whom the Lord Jesus will slay with the breath of his mouth. So he's going to slay him with the breath of his mouth. Well, that sounds like him killing him without hands, right? That's what it says will happen to him. He'll be killed without hands. And bring to an end by the appearance of his coming, whose coming is in accord with the working of Satan, with all power and signs and false wonders, and with all the deception of unrighteousness for those who perish, because they did not receive the love of the truth so as to be saved. And for this reason, God sends upon them a deluding influence, so that they will believe what is false, in order that all may be judged who did not believe the truth, but took pleasure in unrighteousness. So something that's going on here that we see all throughout Daniel and the New Testament is these kings, these leaders at this time that Daniel's talking about are bringing a ton of deception, and it's leading people astray so that they will be judged. Why did so many people get judged in 70 AD, so many in Israel? Because they fell for the lies that these people were telling. That's why. Daniel 9:24 through 27, that talks about how the Romans come and make Jerusalem desolate at the end of the 490 years, which is what happened in 70 AD and what Jesus said would happen in their generation. So let me read Daniel 9:24 to 27. It says, 70 weeks have been determined for your people and for your holy city to finish the transgression, to make an end of sin, to make atonement for iniquity, to bring in everlasting righteousness, to seal up vision and prophecy, and to anoint the Holy of Holies. And so all this stuff is going to be fulfilled and summed up. Everything's going to be done at this time. Verse 25. So you are to know and have insight that from the going out of a word to restore and rebuild Jerusalem until Messiah the Prince, there will be 70 weeks and 62 weeks. It will be restored and rebuilt with plaza and moat, even in times of distress. Then after the 62 weeks, the Messiah will be cut off and have nothing, and the people of the prince who is to come will destroy the city and the sanctuary. And its end will come with a flood. Even to the end there will be war. Desolations are decreed. So again, all this is going to happen within that 490 years, which it did. Verse 27. And he will make a firm covenant with the many for 1 week, but in the middle of the week he will make sacrifice and grain offerings cease, and on the wing of abominations will come one who makes desolate, even until a complete destruction, one that is decreed, is poured out on the one who makes desolate. So here's the first time it's actually talks about the abomination of desolation. It'll talk about it in chapter 11 and 12 as well. He alluded to it in chapter 8, which is also connected to chapter 7. Daniel 11. So in Daniel 11, 29 through 40, it talks about how it's the appointed time of the end. So we have a timetable. It's the time of the Romans, so we know about what time it is. And that Christians are persecuted and refined. And then the ships of Rome, because it talks about these ships earlier, overflow the area. And that overflow means to come in, destroy, and desolate it. And so let me read Daniel 11, 29 through 40. I know it's a lot of reading, but again, all the stuff's connected, so I have to read it. Verse 29 of Daniel 11. At the appointed time, so this is the appointed time. This is the same one that Paul says this is the appointed time. It's that in that last days of the old covenant, the end of the age. At the appointed time, he will return and come into the south, but this last time it will not happen the way it did before. Indeed, ships of Kittim. That word Kittim there is place in Rome. In fact, other translations of the Bible will just say the Romans. Like the Nets Bible, this is the Romans. So indeed, ships of Kittim or Rome will come against him. Therefore, he will be disheartened and will return and become indignant at the holy covenant and take action. So he will come back and show regard for those who forsake the holy covenant. Mighty forces from him will stand, profane the sanctuary fortress, and abolish the regular sacrifice, and they will set up the abomination of desolation. And by smooth words he will turn to godlessness those who act wickedly toward the covenant. But the people who know their God will display strength and take action. And those who have insight among the people will give understanding to the many. Yet they will fall by the sword and by flame, by captivity and by plunder for many days. Now when they fall, they will be granted a little help, and many will join with them in intrigue. And some of those who have insight will fall in order to refine, purge and make them pure until the time of the end, because it's still to come at the appointed time. So just so you know, when it talks about those who have insight, these are the true believers. These are the Christians. So there's stuff happening to all of Israel, but the persecution to those who have insight, they're not just being killed or desolated. It says they're being refined. They're being made pure to the time of the end. So the Christians are being purified, and Israel is will be sacked, as we'll see. Verse 36, then the king will do as he pleases, and he will exalt and magnify himself above every god, and will speak astonishing things against the God of gods. And he will succeed until the indignation is finished, for that which is decreed will be done. He will show no regard for the gods of his father. So if you look, it says gods of the father, but it's God, it's singular. They translate it gods probably because they think this is a Gentile, but that's why this could be somebody from Israel, because it says he will show no regard for the God of his fathers, which the God of their fathers, talking about Yahweh, the true God, or for the desire of women. So quick note on that. What's the desire of women? So if you go back to Genesis, but Genesis 3, it talking to the woman, it says, your desire will be for your husband, but he shall rule over you. So the desire of women is men, their husbands. But this guy is killing all the men. And so all their husbands are being killed. So he's showing no regard for the desire of women. I mean, that's what I believe it is when you interpret Scripture with Scripture. Nor will he show regard for any other god, for he will magnify himself above them all. But instead he will honor a God of fortresses, a God whom his fathers did not know. He will honor him with gold, silver, costly stones, and desirable things. Now this God of fortresses, is he honoring the temple, magnifying the temple over Yahweh? Could be. Or maybe he's honoring Rome, just like we saw, we have no king but Caesar. So it could be honoring the powerful Rome. Verse 39, and he will take action against the strongest of fortresses with the help of a foreign god. He will give great honor to those who recognize him, and will cause them to rule over the many, and will portion land for a price. And at the time of the end, the king of the south will collide with him, and the king of the north will storm against him with chariots, with horsemen, and with many ships. So it talked about earlier the ships of Rome. And so I think the king of the north here is Rome coming in. So he's going, this guy who's exalting himself in the temple, who did the abomination, is going against Rome. And now Rome's coming to destroy him. So he comes with many ships, and he will enter lands, overthrow them, and pass through. So I think Jerusalem gets overflowed, everything destroyed by Rome because of the abomination, which may be from the someone in the Jewish leadership or in Israel, or who knows? Doesn't say. Now it's possible that some of the kings described here in Daniel could refer to the Herods in the New Testament. Why? Because in verse 30 that we just read in chapter 11, it talks about how he's become indignant, or the word there is enraged. And when you look in the Septuagint, that word, indignant or enraged, is only used once in the New Testament. Once. So this guy becomes enraged. And in the New Testament, it refers to Herod. He's the one that gets enraged. And that's in Matthew 2:16. Then when Herod saw that he had been tricked by the Magi, he became very enraged, and sent and slew all the male children who were in Bethlehem and all its vicinity, from 2 years old and under, according to the time which he had carefully determined from the Magi. So Herod did persecute the believers, persecute the Jews there. Now, just so you know, there are lots of Herods, many Herods. And so this could be alluding to a Herod, but these Herods are all connected because they're all part of the same family. Luke 3:1 talks about how there's lots of kings in the land. Now, in the 15th year of the reign of Tiberius Caesar, when Pontius Pilate was governor of Judea, and Herod was tetrarch of Galilee, and his brother Philip was tetrarch of the region of Iturea, and Trachonitis and Lysanias were tetrarch of Abilene. So you had all these kings all throughout Israel. So whether it's the religious leaders or any of these kings, they're all suspect, if you ask me. So some more verses about Herod. Mark 8:15 talks about 11. It says, and he was giving order to them, this is Jesus talking to his disciples, saying, watch out, beware of leaven of the Pharisees and the leaven of Herod. So it wasn't just the Pharisees that were deceiving the people, there was also the leaven of Herod as well. So he was also a deceiver. And then Herod had soldiers, Luke 23:11, and Herod with his soldiers, after treating him with contempt and mocking him, dressed him in a bright robe and sent him back to Pilate. In Luke 23:12, he's friends and enemies with Pilate. It says, now Herod and Pilate became friends with one another that very day, for before they had been at enmity with each other. And I didn't read it all, but when you go back and read in Daniel, you have kings that are at enmity with each other, and then they end up sitting down at the table together. Could be referring to this. I don't know. Possible connection. And then Acts 4:27, he's against Jesus. For truly in this city they were gathered together against your holy servant Jesus, whom you anointed, both Herod and Pontius Pilate, along with the Gentiles and the people of Israel. And then Herod was persecuting the disciples, Acts 12:1 through 4. Now about that time, Herod the king laid hands on some who belonged to the church in order to harm them. And he had James, the brother of John, put to death with the sword. And when he saw that it pleased the Jews, he proceeded to arrest Peter also. Now it was during the days of unleavened bread. Now when he had seized him, he put him in prison, delivering him to 4 squads of soldiers to guard him, intending after the Passover to bring him out before the people. And then in Acts 12:19 through 23, he's killed by his own people. He traveled around, he was angry, he was exalted as God, and he was killed without hands, we'll read in Acts 12:19 through 23. And when Herod had searched for him and had not found him, he examined the guards and ordered that they be led away to execution. Then he went down from Judea to Caesarea and was spending time there. Now he was very angry with the people of Tyre and Sidon, and with one accord they came to him, and having won over Blastus the king's chamberlain, they were asking for peace, because their country was fed by the king's country. And on an appointed day, here's an appointed day again, Herod, having put on his royal apparel and sitting on the judgment seat, began delivering an address to them, and the assembly kept crying out, the voice of a God and not of a man. And immediately an angel of the Lord struck him because he did not give God the glory, and he was eaten by worms and breathed his last. So I'm just showing that there's a lot of parallels with what we read in Daniel with the Herods. And it's multiple Herods. It's not just one person. So in Daniel 12, you have the tribulation, the resurrection, destruction of the covenant breakers, persecution and refining of the saints, abomination of desolation, and all this takes place at the end of the age with that same time frame of 3.5 years. I think I'm going a little long. Can I keep going? Almost done. I'm going to read all of Daniel 12. It's only 13 verses, but it's all talking about the same thing. Now at that time, Michael, the great prince, who stands guard over the sons of your people, will stand. And there will be a time of distress such as never happened since there was a nation until that time, and at that time your people. Jesus talks about this too in Matthew 24. And everyone who is found written in the book will be rescued. And many of those who sleep in the dust of the ground will awake, these to everlasting life, but the others to reproach and everlasting contempt. This is talking about the resurrection, which is also in Matthew 24. And those who have insight, there's the insight again. This is going back to chapter 11. Those who have insight will shine brightly like the brightness of the expanse of heaven, and those who lead the many to righteousness like the stars forever and ever. But as for you, Daniel, conceal these words and seal up the book until the time of the end. Many will go to and fro, and knowledge will increase. He's got to seal the book where the book is not sealed in Revelation. But anyways, verse 5, Then I, Daniel, looked, and behold, 2 others were standing, one on the bank of the river and the other on the bank of the river. And one said to the man dressed in linen who was above the water of the river, How long will it be until the end of these wonders? And I heard the man dressed in linen who was above the waters of the river, as he raised his right hand and his left toward heaven, and swore by him who lives forever, that would be for a time, times, and half a time. So there's that same time frame. And as soon as they complete shattering the power of the holy people, all these events will be completed. And so again, this is a recapitulation of what Daniel has already talked about in the other chapters. So when that final desolation occurs, when everything's destroyed, that's when the end is going to happen. That's when all these things, the resurrection and everything else, is going to happen. Verse 8, As for me, I heard but could not understand. So I said, My Lord, what will be the outcome of these events? Then he said, Go your way, Daniel, for these words are concealed and sealed up until the time of the end. Many will be purged, purified, and refined. Again, we read that earlier, that purging, purifying, and refining, which we see all throughout the New Testament. But the wicked will act wickedly, and none of the wicked will understand. But those who have insight will understand. But from the time that the regular sacrifice is abolished and the abomination of desolation is set up, there will be 1,290 days. How blessed is he who keeps waiting and reaches the 1,335 days. But as for you, go your way to the end, and you will enter into rest and stand again for your allotted portion at the end of the days. So at the end of the age, when all this happens, Daniel will be risen from the dead. And this abomination of desolation that's set up, there's going to be 1,290 days, and then you have the end, that 3.5 years, and that's how long the siege was with the Roman Empire. So Jesus says, when you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, know that the desolation was near, and it was. It took a few years for them to siege it, but the desolation was near. So just a few more things, then I'm done. What we know from the New Testament, the leaders in Israel exalted themselves above God and made great boasts. Their leaders or kings used Rome to persecute the saints, and then God used Rome to destroy Jerusalem and their leaders. So Rome appears neutral throughout the New Testament, but they, like Assyria in Isaiah 10, are both held accountable and are God's servant. So they're held accountable for their action, but they're also called God's servant, which Rome was called his servant as well. And Satan is behind all of this, which we see in Revelation 12 and 2 Thessalonians 2. But the devil is God's devil. God is actually using Satan to deceive the people so that they would be judged for believing the lie. So God's behind it all, and he uses the devil. He uses all that. We need to stick with what we know and not speculate. We know that God used Satan, who used the religious leaders and Rome to accomplish his purposes, to fulfill the scriptures at the appointed time of the end of the old covenant and usher in the new covenant. And then just one more quick note. During the Neronic persecution of the saints, Nero persecuted the saints, both Nero and the leaders in Israel are responsible, and both were boasting and exalting themselves, and both could be considered the little horn, and both could be considered beasts. It's like they were intermingled with iron and clay, because they were. They were using each other. But they were crushed, and the kingdom is now Christ's and has been given to us, and we will reign with him forever and ever.